Hi, Chris.
Hi, Nathan. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day
My pleasure.
to do this podcast. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Been a long time coming, I think.
It has, yeah. So it'll be nice to have the conversations.
Yeah, I guess have the conversation again almost.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Obviously, we've had a great conversation already in the past about what you do, who you are and stuff like that. But if you could, I guess for the sake of the audience that are watching and listening, just give kind of like a short synopsis of, I guess, where you started and what you're doing today. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I am a former senior leader of special education. I started my teaching career 16 years ago. I moved from financial advice. My ex-wife was pregnant. The hours were unsustainable. I'd done some learning support work in the past, so I moved to a behaviour support worker role for a newly academised school. Spent a couple of years doing that, progressed quite quickly, really enjoyed it, but felt that I wanted to become more involved in kind of shaping rather than reacting to students' futures and needs and things. And I was sponsored through my graduate teacher programme. Had whole school SEN responsibility whilst doing my graduate teacher programme. Became a head of department during my NQT year. Then got seriously injured. Developed post-traumatic stress disorder as a consequence. Took a couple of years to actually be diagnosed with PTSD, so I kind of rumbled through life in a rather destructive way. And then progressed into special education, became an assistant head teacher in special ed. Had a period of time out with PTSD, became a little bit debilitating, really. Thought I was in a good place, so I returned for a period of time, but relapsed again with PTSD, and then took 5.5 years out to kind of build a sustainable recovery. During that time, I decided I wanted to do something a little bit more positive and redefine what the narrative of PTSD for me was, which had been destructive and harmful and hurtful. So I came up with a business idea called At One With Nature. And that's something that I'm looking to push forward at the moment. But I'm also working as a support worker, a learning support coach for student athletes who are looking to build a career in sports and performance. So I'm coaching them on their overall well-being, as well as their kind of the learning journey, and kind of helping them integrate into education. And here we are in 2024.
And here we are to date.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. I've been looking forward to it anyway. It's going to be great.
Excellent.
Okay, Chris, for me, if you could, for the benefit of our audience, I guess, tell us your background as regards to, you said you didn't start in education as a career. And then what made you, so it was family, for hours and lifestyle and stuff like that. You didn't, it's not like you picked an easy job though.
No, absolutely. No.
What was your thought process behind it? Did anyone inspire you to choose teaching? Because there's other roles you could have done. How did you come to the mindset to become a teacher? It
was something that from kind of being in my teenage years that people would always talk about, and it's something that I wasn't really interested in. So I did a lot of youth work and volunteering for things like Duke of Edinburgh when I was a teenager. And I then, whilst I was at university, we went round and doing kind of talks for first generation university students. And when I was about 23, the first incarnation of the graduate teacher program, I applied for that to be a primary school teacher. And I was told I was too young at the time. I needed to go and get some life experience. And actually, I think on reflection, it probably was true. I don't think I had the kind of the life experience, the maturity, the kind of the philosophy of mindset and discipline that you need to be a teacher. And then I moved into learning support with children and young people who had really negative experiences. So I became a key skills tutor, learning support officer in 2003, I believe, 2004. And I really, really enjoyed that. And what I saw was that there was a number of young people that had such negative experiences at school, and then suddenly the light went off at 16. that they wanted to achieve something and the school had failed them, and we were kind of picking up the pieces. And so it was always in my mind that if I was going to do it, I wanted to make sure it was done right. And it wasn't until it was that aligning of circumstances. Somebody that had done some supply work for many years before was the person who was advertising the job. So I knew him, I trusted him, I respected him. And so it was that perfect alignment. So in terms of being inspired, I had some wonderful teachers at school. But same as anybody, there were teachers that look back and go, wow, that really was not, and I kind of feel I didn't really understand education until I got older. I didn't really succeed as a learner until I was an adult. I was far more successful in my education journey once I reached adulthood. And even during university, I didn't fulfill my potential as a learner because nobody really connected with me at a point that allowed that kind of spark for learning to explode. And it wasn't until I did my adult literacy subject support qualification through Notts County Council as an adult that I really I like learning. I've kind of got a thirst for knowledge. And so teaching was never on the radar when I was doing the support work. I was more than happy making a difference with kids who were having real significant life challenges, adverse life events, struggling to access learning, struggling with their additional needs or special educational needs. And I thought that was enough. And then I suddenly thought I want to make a bigger difference. And I felt, that I was steered towards elements of leadership from a kind of a pastoral and a behaviour side. But I felt to lead teachers, you need to have at least walked a mile in their shoes, so to speak. And I didn't feel that I would have any credibility as a leader if I hadn't been in the classroom, managed those challenges that you face as a teacher, as a practitioner, and having to spin all of those plates to then move to leadership. So that really was the crystallization. It's like, do you know what? I need to teach. I'm not going to lie and say it was my life's passion. It was my calling. It was life circumstances led me to a path that teaching became something actually I was very good at and really enjoyed. But the step always wanted to be that I was kind of more involved in shaping things and driving things and helping as many people as possible. And I felt that kind of the leadership step was probably where I always felt that I wanted to be.
Okay. So you had a passion for supporting, I guess, the most vulnerable children and also children that needed the most support. And then your mindset was actually I need to teach as well as support.
Yeah.
So you wanted to have those skills, and also, like you say, you wanted to be, if you're going to lead in the future, you want to be able to say you've completed the circle almost.
Yeah, I think it's a credibility thing because the challenges of teaching are so specific that if you haven't had to juggle all of the plates that are associated with running a class through assessment, running report cycles, running homework, marking cycles, you just struggle to actually have a real understanding and to actually be able to empathise with the challenges that teachers face. And so, it was, I felt that to be able to fully support children and young people to get the best outcomes, probably you need to be further up the chain. And therefore, it was the fact that the school were willing to support me through the graduate teacher program was an incredible thing. And I was very fortunate in that sense. My year was the last year of the graduate teacher program in the format that it was before it moved to the kind of the SKIT program as it exists now. So as I say, I was very blessed. But it was a very unique set of life circumstances that led me kind of into the classroom, I suppose.
Yeah. And what type of school was it?
It was a mainstream academy, inner city. We had secondary, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though you went to start in primary?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It was one of those that I think circumstance just, again, if there was, I suppose if there was a at that moment in my life, if there was a job for a support worker in a primary school, it might have been different.
Yeah.
It's one of those where you kind of just go, well, you play the cards that you're dealt.
Yeah.
That opportunity presented itself when I was very disillusioned with financial advising. And I needed something that just was a little bit more of an empathic, humanistic role. The financial advising world at the time, it was 2008, the markets crashed. It was a horrendously toxic industry to exist within. You found yourself kind of questioning your own morals and values and what things are important to you. And I just didn't feel that financial advising was something that at the very basic human being level that I could do. Whereas then when this kind of situation presented itself with education and doing something that was kind of the polar opposite, really, it's doing something that puts back rather than takes out, was important. But as I say, I think it was just circumstance, time, the aligning of all those kind of fates, I suppose, that led me where I was.
Yeah. How much of a different environment is it working in a school than it is financial services then? Like, you're literally the hub of the community.
It's the strange thing is I was a community-based advisor. So the very strange thing as a financial advisor for me was I was going into homes of parents who were like my mate's parents. So kids I gone to school with, I'm going to see them. So teaching in the area that you've grown up in is a very similar thing. So I had children in my lessons who I went to school with their parents, which was, again, is a very strange thing. But, where we were, there was a high level of deprivation, a huge amount of poverty, a lot of societal challenges. And it was about kind of raising aspirations and promoting life chances. So you do become kind of immersed in the kind of the local area, but it's something that I don't think you can even contrast because the worlds are entirely different. The world of financial advice is supposedly about doing the right thing, but when you move in the corporate world, you're sales driven, you're target driven, you're expected to hit those things. And I suppose there is that crossover with education, certainly now with those exam targets, and there is that incentivization, performance related pay and those kind of aspects. So there is a dovetail, but the world itself is completely opposite, because it's about putting individual needs first rather than necessarily just kind of selling your soul for 20 pieces of silver.
So NQT, I'm trying to use the right terminology. It's crossed over ECT now. Yeah. What was it like being an ECT, being a bit older? Do you think it was the right choice waiting? And because there's a lot of people out there that are thinking about teaching as well, maybe, that are older, because you can do PGC now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got a degree already in something. Yeah. I know my brother-in-law did that.
Yeah, I think for me, it presented as many challenges as it was giving advantages. So I had a young daughter, so I was sleep deprived, and I was also teaching 16 hours a week. So I had a full day at uni on the Monday. I would teach Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'd have my paperwork and admin day Friday. And I look back and I was burning out even as an NQT. And then obviously I held whole school 7 responsibility as well. And I think that's an element of what teachers do. You just take everything on, and it's probably, what we'll come on to is one of the major downfalls of the profession. But I think what being a more mature student gave me was I'd got life experience. I understood the challenges that the corporate world presents you, and therefore you can look at the benefits of the education world in context. I was able to bring some life experience to my learners, talk about interviews, talk about the pressures of choosing a career. My career didn't go the pathway that I wanted to go. I wanted to go in the RAF when I was a teenager, and I didn't get through the medical because I'm diabetic. And so, the thing that I'd wanted to do was taken away from me. And all those things add value as a teacher, as a practitioner, as a support worker. But when you are juggling a young family and the commitments that come with that, and trying to spin the plates of learning to teach was really quite challenging. I went deaf. I had a sensory neural hearing loss in the November. I started my GTP in the September. I lost my hearing in the November.
Fully lost it?
In my right ear completely, yeah. So I was fortunate that I had some quite horrific treatment that managed to get me part of it back. I wear a hearing aid. I'm left with tinnitus. So I was literally against the wall. I dislocated my shoulder in that year as well. So I finished my training I got signed off on the paperwork like the first week of July, and then immediately had surgery the following week. So it was a relentlessly stressful kind of period of time. But I do think the maturity that you get from living life experience gives you an advantage. And I would certainly encourage to be able to put things into a better sense of perspective. I do think there is an advantage to going out and doing something first and then progressing into teaching. I think some people are naturally drawn to it, and they're naturally kind of attuned and balanced to be able to be successful teachers. But I do think it is something that probably whether it's the solution to the recruitment and retention crisis is that we're trying to attract more mature people. Who knows? Because some might not tolerate the demands. I just know that I was able to kind of put things into a bit more perspective. When you've worked 80 hours a week, when your job is literally at the mercy of a market, you can be a little bit more kind of circumspect about the challenges that being a teacher presents. And that's not to devalue the experiences that teachers have. It just gives you a little bit, it enables you to get a little bit more distance from things, I suppose. Okay.
And the benefits, would you recommend people try as in support work first, like you did, and teaching assistant and supporting? You don't have to do SCN or behaviour. There's loads of different types of support work.
Absolutely. I think it gives you a very unique understanding of education, the needs of the children and people you work with, the expectations of the classroom, seeing the demands on a teacher's time and the kind of the different roles that they have to play. So I certainly don't think it's anything that I would discourage people with. And I would probably say if you're a little bit unsure, it's a very good way of kind of either swaying you towards the career or putting you off. Because it is, TAs are often the most overlooked people in the profession. And same goes for support workers and those kind of faculty support assistants. They they're kind of the grease that keeps the wheels turning, so to speak. So I would advocate kind of exploring it, but I don't necessarily think it is something that people should consider first. It is possibly just, make your decision. As I say, if you're swaying, it's a good thing to consider, but don't think, I must do that first before I become a teacher.
Okay. It's an option.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's equally a career. It's not just a taster. It's a full-on job.
Absolutely. So I've returned back to support work myself now, and the demands on your time in that it's a different kind of sphere to when I left education in left mainstream education in 2014. So it is completely different, the expectations of that now that it was kind of 10 years ago. And it is hugely fulfilling. And one of the benefits is you don't have the planning load. You don't have the marking load. You can just simply focus on the child and young person. And I think that is quite refreshing to be to remove the shackles that you have as a teacher, which is all of the marking and the planning and all of those things. Just being able to support is a hugely rewarding, valuable, purposeful kind of career.
Why are TAs and support staff so important in schools, education, or just simply, to work with young people and young adults, I guess, as well?
I think teaching assistants and support staff have the unique position to be able to be simply student focused. And I think probably in the 21st century, 2024, with resources being as finite as they are, that's the thing that's missing, because, as we've certainly in the last 12 years moved away from lots of support workers associated with faculties, where we've got behaviour support workers and inclusion workers, TAs that are left, they can simply put the child or young person first without the additional load that you get as a teacher. So as a teacher, you've got 30 children and young people to support. And what you have to be mindful is that you've got to get them through the curriculum, you've got to hit the assessment milestones, you've got the expected grades, you've got to do all those interventions, whereas a teaching assistant and a support worker can simply focus on the young person, what it is that they're experiencing, what do they need, what adjustments could be put in place. And if there is a strong dialogue between the teacher and whatever the additional adult is in the room, then the teacher, they add a huge amount of value to the teacher, because they kind of become that conduit of information between the learner and the teacher. And the teacher can use the TA to direct attention to that young person, or they can use the TA to support a wider kind of element of the group, and then the teacher can direct their attention to the more vulnerable members of the class. So they are pivotal, really. As I say, it's that conduit between the young person and the teacher, and making sure that it's a really cohesive, connected approach.
And I'm presuming you've got to have a really good relationship between the teacher and the TA. Good communication.
I think that's
be on the same page.
I think it's essential. It isn't something that always is taken. I think any teaching assistant will tell you that there are a number of teachers that don't necessarily recognise the value. That sounds like quite a sweeping statement, but I have friends and former colleagues who still are teaching assistants, and situationally, depending on what school they're in, that relationship is really strong, and they feel valued and they feel supported within the school environment. But I think, any teaching assistant will tell you they don't necessarily feel valued at a governmental level in terms of the associated spend and salary increases and terms and conditions, with not valuing that element of the profession anywhere near as highly as we did certainly 10 years ago, I don't think. And I think that's probably something that needs to be significantly addressed, certainly over the next kind of 2 academic years or so. Otherwise, we're going to have a recruitment and retention crisis, not just in the teaching profession, but in the support profession. And then the wheels really will start to come off if that's the case.
Yeah, because you'll get less support for the teachers, less TAs for that one-to-one support.
Yeah, TAs are a force multiplier. And, if they are used in the positive way, the force multiplier works brilliantly, but there can be a force multiplier of negativity. You take that away and the impact is felt massively. And what then happens is the teacher's workload goes up and their effectiveness is diluted. So they are kind of a linchpin, really, for any classroom practitioner, any teacher, any leadership team.
And specialism-wise, did you start as a business studies teacher?
Yeah, I was a business studies teacher, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. What made you pick that? I mean, you could have picked different topics, I guess, maybe.
Financial
background, maybe?
Well, interestingly, it was, so they wanted me to teach maths.
I was going to say maths.
And I can't abide maths. So that was a straight no. I obviously had an English background. But again, I wasn't interested in that. And it was a case of, well, my financial advisor qualifications, the fact I had been in industry and business previously, I'd been in corporate vehicle sales. It meant that I could pass the knowledge tests. And there was a need within the school for a business and enterprise teacher. So again, when I go back to kind of fates, it was just the fates conspiring, the planets aligning, that was the right choice. I can't say I was massively, I massively loved business as a subject. It was a vehicle again. I believe that business studies is because of the financial literacy side of it, and I really push financial literacy through my department. But I felt that business studies probably is one of those subjects that is useful for people that don't necessarily have a defined career path. It's never going to take value, and it's always going to be something that can be used in so many fields post-education. So that really was the reason that I ended up there, was those kind of multifactorial things just going, right, well, this works, and actually I can see value. But as I say, I'm not somebody that felt that business studies was my calling, and I haven't taught business studies now for, I think the last lesson I taught was 2016 of business studies. And I don't really have any desire, I don't think, to go back to teach that. I enjoy teaching a lot of the other different stuff. I'm doing a lot of cover teaching at the moment in my cover English, cover maths, ironically, and a lot of covering of PE and sport, which is brilliant. But as I say, business studies is just a means to an end, really.
So did you find yourself gravitating towards like SEN schools? Is that where your career path went then from there? Or
we had a focused provision unit for autistic children and young people. And I'd done some work when I was supplying after leaving the county council. I'd done some work at a special school for autistic young people. And I had an aptitude for it. My degree is social sciences and psychology, so I understood. I'd done a lot of work around the kind of the theory around autism, and so I had that kind of very strong academic knowledge of it, and then combined with my personality and my skill set, it just became a natural fit for me. And then I was, strongly encouraged by the leadership team to kind of move into that field. And we were able to make some really big strides with kind of inclusive practice for children and young people who were with additional needs, but particularly around autism and pathological demand avoidance and those kind of areas of practice. And then it just continued, really. When I left mainstream, it was I wanted to harness my skills in a more focused way, and I felt that the SEN, certainly for children and young people who were autistic, they were so marginalised, they were so vulnerable, their life chances were so compromised with mainstream education that it just felt a natural move to moving into special ed and kind of immersing myself in that world. And it was transformational, moving into SEN completely changed my life. And it's something that I wouldn't change for the world, even though I was very unwell with PTSD whilst doing it, because it is the most inspiring, humbling part of the profession. I don't think there is another aspect of the profession that can hold a candle to working in SEN, because it just gives you an outlook on life, and it makes you feel so fortunate and grateful for your own life and the lives of your family and your friends and those kind of things. And you don't necessarily get that from mainstream education.
Okay, people that stay in SEN love it. They don't just like it; they absolutely love it. Do you know what I mean? And it's you know, when you talk to someone who's been in SEN or who are in SEN, because it's all they're about. Do you know what I mean? Is the children, improving the lives of the children. They know all the children when you go into the school, and they're just so passionate about making such a big difference in their lives, and they all work so hard to focus on that. And it's such an interesting part of the sector. Not that mainstream doesn't, because they also do, but just feeding off what you've said about SEN and stuff like that. I think it's incredible.
I think the thing with SEN is if you haven't got a very robust kind of wellness system, SEN can be very draining. You often find yourself going home and being far more preoccupied by the challenges that your learners face than you do in a mainstream school. So in a mainstream school, you kind of go home and it's your marking and all of those expectations. In an SEN school, you're going home and wondering, depending what sector you're in, is this young person going to be in school tomorrow? Because if you're working in social, emotional, mental health, are they going to take their own life overnight? Are they going to be harmed to a point that they're not well enough to make it into school? And those are very real concerns that people in that profession face, and it's hugely emotionally draining. The flip side is it's incredibly rewarding, and like you say, it becomes an all-consuming profession, and everything around it is so nurturing and wonderful. But you have to be really secure in your own mental health and well-being, because you can just become completely consumed by the wellness of everybody else, that you don't necessarily prioritize your own well-being.